you can no longer say I'm just a PTA, right?
Right.
So there we go, eliminating that
Right.
phrase from our
Right.
vocabulary.
I'm nervous and scared and not sure, but I had a different perspective.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize that until I was in that cohort when people actually said, well, okay, Jessica, as a PTA, what do you think? What are your opinions and thoughts? And we value them. And that's when I realized, really, really, truly realized the just was gone.
Hmm.
The just of the PT, just a PTA was gone from my vocabulary, and I was valued as a clinician, as an educator, and as a leader.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the PTA Plus podcast. I'm Katie Sutton, your host. Have you ever wondered what RTM is, or remote therapeutic monitoring? Well, today we break it down with our guest, Jessica Nelson from Athelis. She is a physical therapist assistant and is working in this space, remote therapeutic monitoring. So we talk a little bit about what this looks like for her as a physical therapist assistant and for the company that she's working for, Athelis. Athelis is cutting edge. They're really on the verge of all this new technology for healthcare. And so we break down what it looks like for a PTA in this space and maybe what the future of RTM looks like for PTAs. We also talk a little bit about her very non-linear and non-traditional career path as a PTA. I think you're going to find some of the things that she has done as very interesting. She is a physical therapist assistant. She's a massage therapist, an Army vet, a mentor, a teacher, a leader, and she just has learned how to create spaces that PTAs aren't in and start asking questions. And that's the theme of the day, right? So hang in. I can't wait for you to hear what Jessica has to say. And as always, thank you for listening. Hello, Jessica. Welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on today. Lots of exciting things to tell our audience. I'm super excited for us to talk a little bit about your background. You are doing some unique work. You work in remote therapeutic monitoring, or RTM. And this is something that I think the audience needs to know more about. So I appreciate that when I reached out to you, you said yes. It always amazes me, the people who say yes to coming on here who I've never met except for on LinkedIn.
Right. I know. I was like, yes.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. And I can tell right away, you and I have already been talking and chit-chatting for a while. I need to just start hitting record the second that I jump on a call with people because, man, we have these rich conversations before we get
Right.
on. And you and I, we were like, we're friends
Yeah.
immediately. We got
Easy.
each other.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. Yeah, definitely. So you just have such a unique background. I'm excited for everybody to hear about the things that you have done
Thank
and the
you.
things that you are currently doing. RTM is a space that we don't hear a lot about physical therapist assistants being in.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I were kind of like talking back and forth on how we connected. And I meet so many people now through LinkedIn or Instagram or through connections with other podcast people. So I'm meeting all these people and I'm like, I don't remember how exactly we got connected.
Right.
I saw what you do for a living and I'm like, I got to bring Jessica on here to talk about this because it is unique and it's different. So, thank you.
Exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
definitely.
you. Yeah. I was intrigued. I think I'd actually seen your profile before you had reached out, and I was like, curious.
I often say that I like to show up in places where people don't expect
Hmm.
PTAs to be, and
Yeah.
then I just ask a bunch of questions.
Exactly. Me too. I'm
Yeah.
just like, here, we're PTAs, and we're here.
So, like I said, here we are. You and I, we're connected. We're
Yep.
locked in.
Yeah.
So you've been a PTA for a while, 15
Hmm.
years. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell the audience a little bit about your background?
Yeah.
And maybe like give us that story until we got here to the RTM.
Okay. Okay. I was born in. No, I'm kidding. I started my PTA career in 2010, but the way I got there is I was a massage therapist before that, actually, and I started massage therapy in 2002 in Indiana. And way back then, you didn't really need to go to like a huge program. You kind of did weekend courses and an apprenticeship. And then I joined the Army. And when I went to the Army, it was a lot of opportunity for education as well. And so I enlisted in Indiana in the National Guard, and then I was activated to active duty, went overseas. When I came back, I was just in a different space than all of my peers that were my age. I was about 2021. And I was like, well, I've already been thrown into the workforce. College seems different than what I thought it was going to be. So I decided to go to massage therapy school in Maryland because I was transferred to Maryland. So I went to massage therapy school, and that same school had a PTA program. And I was just like, I wonder what this is. Because PT school had, at this point, was transitioning to DPT program. And I knew that going to a typical undergrad and then grad school wasn't exactly in what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the workforce a little bit quicker, just given kind of what I had been through already. So I did the massage therapy program, and then I could work as a massage therapist while going to PTA school because it was in the same community.
Yeah.
So I then joined,
Yeah.
the PTA program in 2008, graduated in 2010. And then 2011, I started mentoring students that were first years in the PTA program. So that kind of started my mentorship teaching experience and developed that, oh, I really have a passion for helping and mentoring and teaching students that are just need a little extra something, like a little one-on-one, a little guidance, a little calming down, all those different components. So in 2011, I started teaching massage and then mentoring and tutoring in the PTA program. And then I was hired as a PTA in Maryland, part-time status, so I could still teach, I could still massage, kind of did PRN. So like I would just go in when patients were there, and then that started to turn into a full-time position. So then I did PTA full-time in Maryland, like in the greater Baltimore, DC area, and then taught as part-time faculty for the PTA program that I graduated from. So I taught part-time, usually PTA 101, which was just like, what is physical therapist assistant? What is physical therapy? How do I wash my hands?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like all the basics of like, what's a wheelchair? What are crutches? How do you talk to patients? How do you introduce yourself? So it's just the foundation of physical therapy. So I taught that for about 10 years, and then worked my way up into full-time PTA at the company that I was at. During that, I started kind of questioning. I'm a questioner. So anyone that knows
I love
me,
it.
there's like, I'm like, well, how can we do this? And they're like, we're not sure. And I'm like, well, maybe let's figure it out. So just started kind of putting myself in front of people, just saying like, let's really educate the PTAs that we have in our network to be a bigger presence. So our leadership was, how do we hire more PTAs? How do we get that PT-PTA ratio a little different? As we know, there are different models across the country. You can have, 2 PTs and 1 PTA. You can have 5 PTAs and 1 PT. So it kind of depends on what model you want in your clinic. And we were kind of in the middle. We didn't know. So part of me, my goal was, well, let's figure this out. Like, well, how do we get more PTAs? So when you go to leadership, it's how does this benefit the clinic? How does this benefit the company? How am I going to sell this to stakeholders, to leadership, and all of that? So I kind of created presentations that talked about numbers, productivity, access to care, different barriers that different clinics would have. So we had about 60 PT clinics in our network, and that was Virginia, Maryland, and DC. So we had 3 different kind of states, jurisdictions that had different laws for their PTs and their PTAs, but we were one company.
One company.
So,
Yeah. That's
so we were trying to standardize, like how do we standardize this education, this leadership, but also follow all of these different state practice acts. So we have Maryland that has general supervision, but we have DC that has direct supervision. So there were some of those barriers that we also were trying to conquer. So it's like, how do we hire more PTAs, but also have the appropriate supervision of all of those PTAs? And it really comes down to education of leadership, the PTs, the staff, including admin and clinic assistants or PT techs, and the PTA themselves. So we kind of developed a mentorship program that encompasses all of that in order for all parties to be educated, in order to be empowered to make the change.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you did a lot of the things that I have been having a lot of conversations with different PTAs on this show, actually. Just kind of putting yourself into the position that you know is the direction that you want to go into.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's the whole proximity principle, right? So, like, if you know who fascinating people are that you want to be around and work around and emulate, you get yourself closer to
Mm-hmm.
them, and that's what you were doing. So,
Mm-hmm.
you had a goal, you had something that you were trying to accomplish and do, and so you got yourself closer and
Mm-hmm.
closer and closer to that
Mm-hmm.
specific thing, and then you start asking a lot of questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the bottom line is like once you get to a certain point where you find the people that you want to work with, and you know what you're good at, then how do I get paid for this kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of
Right.
check off all of those boxes of some of the conversations that I've been having on this show in the most recent couple of
Mm-hmm.
episodes, the last couple of months. So it's really cool that you're bringing that up because it really
Right.
solidifies that what I'm saying is you got to put yourself out there.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. You're in charge
yeah.
of your destiny. And so a lot of it was also, okay, some people are like, well, I'm just a PTA, and I always try to take the just out because there's no reason to say that.
Mhm.
I am a PTA and I'm a massage therapist and I'm an educator and I'm a leader. And so part of it was, how do I take the PTA and the DPT and kind of bridge that space that sometimes is created with education differences, with clinical, with the things that some people might consider like missing, but it's like, but we can still add those in after our PTA education. So I went back to school and did a bachelor's degree in physical therapist assistant. So you go to PTA school, it's an associate's, right? It's at a community college level, and they keep it there because it's really important for the community. This is a job that you can enter in quickly, right? So it
It's not
creates
meant
a
to be a
lot of,
stepping stone. This is
yeah.
a career. Yeah.
Yes, it's a career. So I knew that in corporate anything, degrees are
Mhm.
very important. So I chose to go back to school and do an online. It was completely virtual through Pima Medical Institute. I think
Okay.
it's Mesa, Arizona. I promote it hugely. It was phenomenal. It
Awesome.
changed everything for my like future in my career because I knew if I had that degree, things on paper looked different. But I
Mhm.
also knew if I had the education, I presented different, I treated different, I communicated differently. So I was able to take what I learned in that and apply it directly to my care. Like I learned things that I didn't learn in my associates. Of course, there was a pharmacology class. And I was like, PTAs need pharmacology. So I went to the PTA program that I graduated from, and I was like, we need to include pharmacology, just an intro. So I just developed an intro curriculum and presentation on just what is pharmacology,
Yeah.
because we see it every single day in clinic. I have a patient that comes in on 10 medications. If I don't know how that interacts with how they present as a patient, and I'm asking them to do too much or too little, that changes my whole entire plan of care and my interaction with that patient. So being able to add that education into the PTA curriculum, I think is really important because that's where those spaces, we start to fill them in.
Mhm.
When we fill in those spaces, we then elevate the PTA to I am a PTA and beyond, PTA plus,
Yep.
right?
Exactly.
So,
I mean, you're kind of like so you can just take over the show at this point if you want. Like, because you're
co-host.
hitting all of the points that we always talk about every single time. I mean, I always ask, there's a form that guests fill out before they come in or on the show, and one of the questions is fill in the sentence with as many of these that you can. So, what makes you a physical therapist assistant plus? What makes you a PTA
Mhm.
plus? Well, you're an Army veteran. Thank you so much for your service. I
Thank you.
appreciate all that you do. You're an educator. You're also you're a massage therapist. You know, you've done all these different things to kind of further your degree and further your education
Mhm.
and further your knowledge. So you are beyond a physical therapist assistant. You can no longer say I'm just a PTA,
Right.
right?
Right.
So there we go, eliminating that
Right.
phrase from our
Right. Right.
vocabulary. I'm a PTA, plus I do all these amazing
Mm-hmm.
things on the side too. So
Yeah.
you just kind of hit the nail on the head with all of those. And I'm glad that you brought up the bachelor's degree, because I am an educator myself. My
Mm-hmm.
real job, my adult job,
Okay.
where I don't get to just hang out and talk to people, is in PTA education. And I
Okay.
have students ask me all the time about bachelor degree,
Mm-hmm.
moving on, doing bridge programs, or doing a traditional DPT program. And sometimes these are options for students.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
yes, the associate's degree remains the only accredited program.
Right.
But what you just said is so valuable. We have to be able to invest in ourselves and not
Mm-hmm.
expect an immediate return on investment every single time.
Right.
So I got a bachelor's degree and paid for it out of my pocket, every
Mm-hmm.
single cent of it, but it was worth it because it got
Mm-hmm.
me to a new step. I knew
Right.
that there were other things that I could do and wanted to do beyond the clinic. And so to me, the return on investment was all of the other doors that it opened
Right.
afterwards. Did I have to
Right.
pay
Exactly.
for it? Yes,
Yeah.
I had to pay for it.
Exactly. Exactly.
But it was worth it to me. Now, there are options for PTAs to do this degree, and I'm glad that you mentioned some of the benefits that you got from it, because while it's not an accredited degree,
Mm-hmm.
you just told me like 3 or 4 benefits
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
it brought you to something new,
Right.
right?
Right. And
Yeah.
leadership recognizes, okay,
Mhm.
not only do you have an associate's in physical therapy, I now have a bachelor's in PTA,
Yeah.
with advanced education in that, and that allows doors to open and me to say, well, my education is what it is, and I can now apply for this job. I can now do this in the clinic. I can teach. It did so much for not only my patient care, but my education leadership, my ability to communicate with other leadership inside my company. And then the next step I took, and this one I was not sure I was going to do this program, but the APTA has a program called the Fellowship for Academic Leadership.
Mhm.
It's a 1-year program. It's a cohort of about 20, usually 20 people. And I saw it and I was like, I don't know. But about 5 years ago, my goal was to be a PTA program director.
Mhm.
That's where I thought I was going. It was all kind of lined up. Um, Things in life change, and so that wasn't where I was going to go anyways. But at the time, this fellowship through the APTA was going to give me advanced leadership
Mhm.
education in order to apply for those jobs. So my PTA director at my program, she she is a veteran as well, and so we connect very similarly in our like push forwardness. I was hesitant, and so she printed off the application, and she's like, "I filled this out for you.
That's
You
that's great. I love it.
She's like, you n- need to do this. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm not good enough, right? I am. And there was still a part of me that was like, but I'm still just, right? Like,
Imposter
there's,
syndrome.
how can, 100%. I was like, I don't know enough. I only have a bachelor's. Everyone in there has a doctorate. Everyone in there has a PhD. Like, and so I just went, do it. And so I submitted it, and the person called and she was like, we want you, we want a PTA, we need PTAs. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And it was the scariest, most exciting, mind-blowing experience that I've had as
Love it.
like a student, as everything, because I was every day I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try. And I was very upfront about that. I was like, I'm not going to hide that I'm nervous and scared and not sure, but I had a different perspective.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that until I was in that cohort when people actually said, well, okay, Jessica, as a PTA, what do you think? What are your opinions and thoughts? And we value them. And that's when I realized, really, really, truly realized the just was gone. The
Mhm.
just of the PT, just a PTA was gone from my vocabulary, and I was valued as a clinician, as an educator, and as a leader.
And this is something that, audience, you need to pay attention to this. This is something that has been mentioned before. The last couple of episodes that have been coming out, we've talked about this very specific thing. Number one is saying yes to, or at least considering, because you
Hmm.
could have said no, and that
Hmm.
would have been fine if you said no.
Yeah.
But if someone brings opportunity to you, you should at least explore it, because that means that they're seeing something in you that you haven't necessarily maybe
Hmm.
recognized yourself, or maybe you have recognized it, you just haven't been ready to take that step.
Yeah.
Because taking that step is super scary, but
Yes.
you have to hit the start button. If you wait
Yeah.
until you're ready for everything, you're never going to start.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Right?
And I had lived like that for so long. And I'm not going to go into like military and army stuff, but your brain changes when you go through things, right? And I
Mhm.
hadn't worked through the things to empower my brain to think about the future in the same way. And so that was 2018 that I did the fellowship. During that time, I also was like, all right, Jessica, you also are important enough to work on all of these other things. And so together that allowed me to see the value and the worth in all of that, and to hear what people were saying and not just say, okay, no, like that's not true, but to
Mhm.
actually like take it on. And so that experience, when I finished that program, I remember just being like, I can do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly which program you're talking about. And it,
Mhm.
it is, I mean, it's challenging. Anything that you say yes to that's going to be a process, it's going to take your time. It's going to take energy. It's going to take work. Nobody's going to hand you anything.
Right.
I mean, you got to be your own boat. You got to go out and save yourself in some instances and whatnot, but it can be worth it. And there's a lot that you can learn along the way. So I'm so excited that you didn't just kind of pass it up, and that you
Hmm.
kind of took that to heart, and somebody saw something in you. And I think it worked out really good for you.
It did. It did. And you meet people. I got to meet people all over the country that were in different
Mhm.
phases of their PTA or PTA or PT career. There was me and I think one or two other PTAs, and the rest were PT program educators. And so it also allowed me to see, okay, where are the changes and the differences between our PT education leadership and our PTA education leadership, and where can we kind of bridge some of those spaces. I don't like to say gaps because that sounds like it's a negative, where it's really just a space that we can put more into,
Mhm.
and kind of change how we view that as well. Because when we think about PTs and PTAs, I always kind of tell this story of first starting out. It's like you have PTAs that just want to work so bad, and you have PTs that are like, well, I don't really like working with PTAs. And it's like, well, I have PTs I don't like working with. So it's like it goes both ways.
Yeah,
Right? So it's
we
like
can say that about
until
a lot of different, yeah.
yeah, you can say that in every aspect of your life, but until you work on that relationship, you don't know what's possible. And so
Mhm.
empowering the PTA to stand up and say, no, this is what I can do, what I can't do, what I'm willing to do, and what I want to learn to do to support the PT PTA relationship. That's what it's about. It's like I see myself as a team member and a support member. And so I look at it as how can I support this clinic? How can I support the PTs I work with? And how do I support my patients? And
Mhm.
that's when I go into the clinic thinking, how does this work as a whole? Not that I am just a sole practitioner looking to only do my own caseload that
Mhm.
day. It's much bigger
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things that you've mentioned that I think are, we need to kind of highlight these a little bit deeper, is you said that when you went into these rooms, people were interested in hearing your voice and opinion. So speaking of your fellowship, and I don't think that PTAs are showing up enough in those
Mhm.
places. So I told you I like to show up to places where PTAs aren't supposed to be and ask a
Mhm.
bunch of questions.
Yeah.
But I have yet to be kicked out of those spaces. That's the
Right.
thing, is
Right.
that when you sign up for these kind of opportunities, they want and value the PTA perspective. So there
Mhm.
isn't enough PTAs who are
Correct.
stepping into roles that are saying, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it. Let
Yeah.
me learn."
Yeah.
So when you show up and you're ready to rock and roll, people are like, "We need your voice. We need
Mhm.
your opinion," and it's
Yeah.
very much so valued. So keep showing up into those places, and it is scary sometimes being the only one,
Mhm.
but that's okay. So,
Mhm.
and
It is. I
yeah.
for the career at my last healthcare system. So we had, like I said, 60 PT clinics, and we had like 14 hospitals. It was a very large healthcare system. Um, and at the time, only PTs were eligible for leadership roles. And when I heard that, I basically said, I said, excuse me, why? What? Yeah. I was like, what? Based on these qualifications, there are many PTAs in our system that have the years experience, the education, the degrees, and the knowledge and the leadership skills to do this. So can we rewrite these job descriptions to include PTAs as long as they have the qualifications that are for this leadership role?
Yeah.
And for years, it was kind of like, it just kind of pushed and pushed. But then I then pushed and pushed. And I was like, I have the attention of this, of all of these PTAs. I got promoted to PTA mentorship coordinator, which means I ran the PTA mentorship program. PTAs could be clinic coordinators, which means they were kind of like a small management position in one clinic. So I could run one clinic and just say, like, yeah, like here's the schedule, here's our ordering, here's like, you can have this day off, you can have this day off. The next step is clinic director and then regional director. So at the time, PTAs were not eligible for anything above that clinic coordinator position. And after years of education courses, the fellowship, degrees, all of the things to make me qualified, the PTA was not allowed in that. And so before I moved, I kind of said, like, my last goal is that PTA should be eligible for the regional director, which is you're in charge of multiple clinics. So right before I moved, they changed the job description to include PTAs that had the eligible qualifications, and I was offered that job. And I was like, I've done it. I felt that I changed the culture of how PTAs were viewed in that company, to say we recognize that PTAs are valuable enough as people, as clinicians, and as leaders to be eligible to apply for these roles. So when I say, like, when I resigned, I was at the top of my career at the time. That's how I felt, because I was able to just open everyone's eyes. And it wasn't me by myself. I'm not going to take full credit. Like, we had teams of PTAs. We had people that were willing to listen and to take a chance. I was just vocal enough to kind of like say, hey, we are valued, we're worthy to make changes in the leadership in order to have better clinics, better patient experiences, better access to care. So I was really proud. And I can say that now, I was really, really proud of myself in that moment to be able to say, because that goes forward. Like, that is going to move forward in that whole entire region for all of those clinics. Like, we know it's possible. What can I do next?
It has your fingerprints all over it, and that's something that you can take with you forever. You ask the question, why not? And that's something that I appreciate. I don't think that enough of us ask that. I mean, I'm a PTA. Yes, I have a bachelor's and a master's degree. Never had the desire to go on to PT school. I love being a PTA.
Me too.
That's who I am,
Yeah.
right? But I worked for a DPT program for a year, and I was like, well, I fit the qualifications. I wasn't teaching per se. I was working in a very administrative role, but like, I fit all the qualifications, and it was a great experience. But that wasn't something that PTAs were doing. And I mean, I'm so grateful to the program, because they were like, yeah, we never thought about hiring a PTA. This is the perfect role for you right now, And so, of course, it wasn't a long-term thing for me, but I am always grateful for that time that I had to spend there. But I had to be willing to step outside of what we traditionally think.
Right.
If you're looking for a job and all you're punching in is physical therapist assistant,
Right.
that's all you're going to get.
Yeah.
Like, if you're on any kind of job search platform, you got to start thinking about the skills that you have that might take you a little bit broader than that. And
Yeah.
then just ask, why not? Why,
Exactly. Just apply
why
and
can't it?
justify. Yeah.
You weren't
Yeah.
making any, it wasn't outside of your scope. You weren't working outside of your legal scope of practice, right? Like, you can schedule people to come into work. You can
Yeah.
schedule their
Exactly.
day off.
Right.
It doesn't require that anything outside of your legal scope of practice, right?
Right, right. I think part of it at first, and so like the change in culture and the mindset is, well, how can a PTA supervise a PT? Well, there's clinical and there's management and there's leadership. And those are two different things. There's operations and then there's clinical. So me saying to a PT, you did your evaluation wrong, that's not really management and leadership. That's something completely different. As a PTA, do I already know how to recognize that? Yes, because if I can't recognize when a PT has missed something, then we're not a good team. So part
Mhm.
of my PTA education is I already know what all of the evals should look like. I should know how this all runs based on my experience as a clinician. The leadership component is what I bring as a person, and it doesn't really have anything to do with my PTA degree.
Mhm.
It's me as Jessica or whoever it is that's leading. So all of these opportunities and jobs, you just apply and you say, why not? And then you present how you can,
Mhm.
right? Because they don't want to have to figure out how you can. You should figure that out, just as
Yeah.
how you bring that solution to something that you're challenging. You bring that solution, and then they say, oh, well, you figured it out. You've already showed that you can lead and that you can change and that you're in it. So you've already fit all of those expectations.
Mhm.
And so it's just a really powerful way to get to that next thing that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. You've touched based on all the things that I've really kind of been hitting home lately. Followership. I don't know if you've ever heard of followership.
Mm-mm.
Have you heard of
No,
that?
no.
So, and this isn't what today's episode is about. We have veered so much. We will talk about remote therapeutic monitoring.
Part two.
Yeah, part two. I mean, we could do a whole nother episode if we needed to, but
Yeah.
followership is essentially, I mean, you hear so much about leadership, right? Like
Mhm.
being a good leader and what does leadership
Yeah.
look like and these qualities of leadership. But as PTAs, we kind of fit into this followership category really
Mm.
well. And
Mhm.
what I mean by followership does not necessarily mean like how many people follow me on social media.
Right.
It also doesn't mean that I'm a doormat, right?
Right.
But a good follower lifts up and supports the leader. So if you
Mhm.
think about the plan of care, okay? So our PTs write the plan of care, us PTAs, it is our job to be the cheerleader of this plan of care, right?
Yep.
So we're going to be driving it home. We're going to be bringing solutions to the table and saying, hey, this is something I think we can do with this patient, and this is what we can add. And we're spending a lot of
Right.
time with them. And so, yeah, they were the leader. They were the ones that set things into motion,
Yeah.
but we're the ones that are pushing it across the finish line, right? So
Correct.
you have to have good followership skills in order to do that. Good
Mhm.
listening skills, good reasoning, good ways to ask questions, building that relationship, the willingness to come and ask questions. Because, like you said, like, what if there is a mistake? Like, we're
Mhm.
humans, right? So
Yeah,
these can make a mistake
happens.
or
Yeah.
miss something, but we are that second set of eyes that can help catch and things like
Mhm.
that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that we don't focus enough as a profession on the followership portion, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's a really like holistic view also
Mhm.
of a job, of working, of clinics. I think of any, you can take that into anything in the
Absolutely.
world. Yeah, for sure. But it's a really, really powerful way to like bring like empowerment to the PTA position and say like, PT, I recognize what you have and I'm here to lift that up by these skills that I have. And together, our clinic is going to be stronger. Our patients are going to be happier, right? So, like a big part of the PTA is the sales component,
Mhm.
right? So we have this huge, like I've always said, like I'm also a salesperson because I have to sell myself from almost day one eval day in
Mhm.
clinic. And so the different, and we can at some point talk about the difference of this specifically with in clinic and remote therapy, is that in clinic, the PTA I work with can say, hey, Mr. Smith, there's Jess. She's your PTA. You're going to see her a lot. And that sales pitch starts right then and there.
Mhm.
In the remote world, I'm not in clinics, so I don't have that face to face, but I'm still introduced at the eval level to say, Jess is a part of our team. And that's how you get patient buy in on both sides. So without having kind of like that sales component. And then when the patient comes to me, they're like, oh, well, you're not the first therapist I saw. I'm not, but I'm a second set of eyes. I'm a second brain. We work closely together. Everything we do, we've already talked about you. All of these things, that sales component, I've definitely taken into the remote therapeutic monitoring component very strongly.
Yeah.
Because there's a call center component as well where you're just calling people. You're like, hey, here's me. So
Yeah.
that clinical skill that's so important to build that team is also such a powerful skills for PTAs to pull forward if they're interested in remote therapeutic monitoring.
That's great. That's a great advice. Yeah, we have got to be selling, like you said, the salesman part,
Mm-hmm.
selling both the PT and the PTA to the patient, right? So, I think that it's such a really cool concept to think of the way that we speak of each other in front of the patient
Mm-hmm.
and the way that we introduce each other to the patient. Like, hey, this is Jessica. Man, she's got these like mad skills. She does this, this, and this. She's been trained in these specific areas. You're going to
Right.
love working with her. um, Great PTA, couldn't think of a better fit for this patient, right?
Right.
So we've got to be building each other up, and we're really emphasizing the importance of each other to the patient so that they're not feeling like they're being passed off.
Right.
Because that's when we do become just a PTA,
Right.
is when we just automatically kind of push each other into
Yeah.
those boxes, and that's when we do become that. If we can really lift each other up, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's part of that followership component,
Mm-hmm.
and those followers do become leaders. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not just a this is how it
Right.
is, and there's leaders, there's followers. They intermix at times, so like we
Definitely.
cross those boundaries from time to time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And part of like the biggest part of like the mentorship that I had at the company was all of this we taught to the PTAs, the new grads and the new hires. So when a PTA was maybe a student with us and then they took a job, we were like, you are now matched with a seasoned PTA in our network that already has all these skills.
Mhm.
That's going to show you and teach you how to stand up for yourself, how to talk about your scope of practice, how to sell yourself, how to be a part of that team. So we start that from a new grad. Or if it's a seasoned PTA that's coming on from a different company that might have just had a different experience, we're like, this is how you're going to fit and be as successful as possible inside our network. And so giving not only the PTAs all of that knowledge, but then going around to each clinic and giving, a talk and an education talk to the whole clinic. So that included the admin, because like the PT will say, okay, you're going to see me and Jess go up front and schedule. So now we've disconnected from the patient. So now they're up front and they're scheduling and they're like, oh, I'm seeing John the PT. The admin also knows, well, also there's Jess. So I'm
Mhm.
going to say, you're going to see both because I can open up double the amount of appointments for you. If you have a time constraint, if you have
Mhm.
kids, if you're at work, this now allows you to have two full schedules of
Mhm.
people that care about you and are working together for you. And so we've now sold it a third time to that patient and to that team. The
Mhm.
same with clinic assistants. They're answering the phones, they're back there scheduling, and they're like, oh, you're seeing John and Jess. Perfect. This is good. Like, we have so much opportunity for you to come in and meet the goals that you set with your therapist. So
Yeah.
now we've included almost four different people in this component. And so the mentorship of educating all parts of the clinic really empowers the PTA. And then that's when you have a change in culture, a shift in mindset for
Mhm.
the future.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the outcomes with your patients are gonna be
Yeah.
10 times better
Yeah.
if they believe in the process, right?
Hmm.
That's something I'm constantly telling my students.
Yeah.
If your patient does not buy in, if they do not believe this process, it's not gonna
Yeah.
help.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Not gonna help. So we are 36 minutes in, and we have
Okay.
yet to talk about remote therapeutic monitoring. So that's exactly
Next.
what we're gonna do right now. We're diving in. Okay, so you made
Perfect.
this jump from
I
clinic
did.
to more of a non clinical, or is it really non-clinical? It's a
It's non
non-traditional.
it's non in clinic, I would
Okay.
say. It's out of clinic clinical care in therapy. I would think that's like a good way to look at it because it's not just administrative work. This is still engaging with patients about the care that they're receiving in clinic. So it depends on how much you want me to go into like all of the stuff, but Medicare had put out new codes kind of during pandemic times, recognizing that there's more to PT than just what goes on in the clinic, right? There is communication outside. Patients call us, they're confused, they're in pain, their exercises don't make sense,
Yeah.
something happened, right? So we take time to pick up that phone and say, okay, hey, what's going on? Tell me about it. And that could be a couple minutes. And as we know, that could be 25 minutes,
Mhm.
depending on what's happening. So we either do that over lunch before we start our day, at the end of the day, we're, making phone calls, we're answering emails. None of that's captured in a way that is really added to the documentation or our billing cycle. And so I don't always want to talk about just the fact that this is billable time, but it's skilled time. And skilled time should be recognized as something that's worth payment and documentation to say, like, I'm not only talking to this patient for the 45 to 75 minutes that they're in front of me, I'm also engaging in ways that are benefiting them between visits. They could be on vacation, they could be out sick, they could just be like, I have to work 12 hours just for the next 2 weeks, I can't come in clinic. So how else are we bridging that space that we have with these patients? And so the idea of remote therapeutic monitoring was for the patients that couldn't get into clinic because of the pandemic, or maybe that are in more rural areas that just don't have access the same way. And so now we've been able to pull this forward to be able to capture all of those minutes and times that we're spending with patients that are outside the clinic. So yes, my role is not in a four-walled clinic, but it's still clinical care. So I don't really know if it's classified as non-clinical, maybe non.
Yeah, that's what I was like, as soon as I started to say it, I'm like, that's not true.
Yeah,
But
and I hadn't really thought about that until you started to kind of question that phrase as well. So I think that's a really interesting spin to put on it, is that it's clinical, just not inside of a clinic.
a non-traditional clinic outside of
Yeah.
the clinic role.
Yeah. And so Medicare says, like, it's not considered telehealth because it's different than telehealth. So it's therapy. It's called like also therapy, or in addition to. I think there's a phrase, I can't think of it at this exact moment, but it's basically just the other stuff that happens.
Okay.
So there's a couple, and there's many different models. So RTM is remote therapeutic monitoring. So I am monitoring.
Give us the 101. Give us the.
So it's just kind of, this is new to me as well. So I'm going to try to give you the 101 based on what I know, is that we are providing additional support to what's going on in the clinic with your therapist in clinic. So you go for an eval, you do your stuff, you come home with a list of exercises and usually a list of questions. We all know as clinician and as patient, evals are limited. There's a lot going on. And I'm going to lead into like how the PTA helps with this. There's a lot going on in an eval. You can't get to everything, right? We know that PTs have a lot of evals and limited time. As a PTA, one of my thoughts is always, how do I help that? How do I make that burden feel a little less? One thing is that I can now, from a remote component, take time to talk to that patient about their exercises in a detailed way that sometimes you don't get in a clinic. So it's supportive care for the times where you want to spend that time, but you're like, I have 55 minutes. How am I going to get through everything? And give them the homework that they need to be successful. So part of remote therapeutic monitoring is that can be taken away from in-clinic a little bit, not taken away fully, but it can just be less burdensome, I think, for a clinician to know that they have a support member outside their clinic that can answer questions and motivate and really work with compliance on the home part. The home part, what we ask patients to do is kind of like what a doctor asks when they take medication. You have high blood pressure, you take this medication, something's going to change. You have a stiff knee, you take this exercise, something's going to change. But it's viewed a little differently than medication. But if we can kind of get the patients to understand how important it is. And so part of my role is when I call and engage with patients, it's, you're doing great. Let's also do a little bit more. And let's talk about how these exercises fit in your life. Because patients are like, I don't have time. All right. Barrier right away. So
time. Yep.
How is RTM helping with that barrier? And that's really what it's about. It's like, how can I contact these patients and say, okay, you don't have time, but you were in bed this morning, so you can do your single knee to chest stretch. You go to bed tonight, you can do your lateral trunk rotation. You're sitting in a red light, you can do your scap retractions. And they're just sometimes like, huh. So how do we add it to your life, right? So we want to add time to your life, not take away from it. And so that's how I kind of look at it from my point of view is I'm there to support. I'm still supporting the PT and I'm still supporting the patient. It's just from a phone call and kind of engaging with like, how are you feeling? Are you having a bad reaction to these exercises? And if that's the case, I can contact your PT right away and let them know when they see you next, something might need to be adjusted. So when that patient comes in and they say, oh, well, this caused me pain, we're now taking X number of minutes from that inpatient care to adjust maybe one exercise where the PT already knows that it's happening and coming in and they can process that. And it's a little bit of a quicker system in clinic. And then they can actually move on and do their in-clinic care that they wanted to do. So it kind of just takes a little bit of burden of home exercise program away from the inpatient care where you're like already trying to do as much as you can in that 45, 55 minutes.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding this correctly, what I'm hearing you say is this is like, it's like a supplement. It's like an
Mhm.
adjunct to
Yes.
what we're already doing, right? So it's like we have that cake that we bake, but this is like that final layer of icing that
Mhm.
we're just kind of like sealing the cracks and
Yeah.
we're filling in filling in gaps. We're
Yeah.
kind of like
Finessing.
finessing, yeah, like,
Mhm.
we're just kind of making that, a little bit more, embellished,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
it's an adjunct to what we are
Mhm.
already doing.
Right, right. And it just, for the feedback I get, are patients are like, thank you for this support, right? Because I think we know the psychology of physical therapy is really important. I always say an undergrad should be in psychology, pain psychology for all clinicians,
Mhm,
because we engage with patients so much
mhm,
multiple times a week. We learn their whole life. We learn their psychology. We learn what's going on mentally, physically, emotionally in their lives. And we know that when patients come in, they say over and over again, I just want to be heard. I just want someone to hear this pain and say, okay, it's real, let's do something about it. And so we're offering for them to be heard more, to be supported, and to be felt more. And so you have this holistic approach of just, I'm just not, a number on today's schedule.
mhm,
Someone is contacting me, someone is texting and saying, how are your exercises going? Because we also are collecting data, right? So each month, in order to bill for these codes, you have to collect some data, you have to engage, and you have to show that in order for it to be eligible for billing. So some softwares, like a home exercise software app, you might have a thing that says, what's your pain level today? Did you do your exercises? So we can collect what your pain is throughout the week. We can collect how many days a week you're doing your exercises. Let's say they're prescribed 4 days a week, and you're like, oh, I did it 4 days a week. We know that you're 100% compliant. We now have number data to show insurances that we are making strides for that plan of care. So it's also supportive documentation for meeting our goals and for billable purposes as well.
So this is really interesting, and I mean, I've known, about remote therapeutic monitoring. I feel like it really has just, come on to, like, the PT scene in the
Mhm.
last, I don't know, would you say
Couple
5 to 6
years.
years?
Yeah, I would say 2020 is when the codes were put out.
Okay, yeah.
And then I would say in the last 2 to 3 years is where like billing companies and even companies like WebPT or EHRs are really starting to see like, oh, this is something that we could add to be supportive to our documentation and to capture all of those moments that you're engaging with patients that have been lost for all of our past.
Yeah, so, like, the company that you work for, you partner with other facilities. So
Yeah.
it's a
So
service that's being provided.
yes, yeah. So the company I work for, Athelis, they are a revenue care management company. So RCM, so they do billing. And
Mhm,
they also are a remote patient monitoring. So an RPM, which we have a nursing team that monitors like blood pressure, glucose
mhm,
with like physicians and primary care physicians.
of course, mhm,
So our EHR and our billing company, we have quite a few PT clinics. And those PT clinics, we're like, oh, like what about RTM? Like let's look into this. Let's explore that we already do billing. So how can we capture some of this other stuff that's going on to provide RTM services? So we are building this currently. So that's why I say I've only done this a few months because it's a very new
Wow.
program
Yeah. Mhm.
for this. And so we're building with the PT clinics, excuse me, that we have. So I am the PTA that works with these PT clinics.
Mhm.
So I have a compact license in many states. So that's kind of how, as a PTA, how am I eligible to do this across the country is that my home state is Maryland. Maryland is a part of the PT compact, which
Mhm.
allows you to treat in multiple clinics or multiple states in a mainstreamed way.
Mhm.
So instead of having to apply to every single state, which can take months, I can apply to the states that have compact privileges and it takes minutes, which
Mhm.
is phenomenal. So I think
Yeah.
I have 13 licenses right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I know I'm actively working in 4 states. So I work under 4 states. We have clinics in these 4 states under the PT. Now, the nuances are that I have to be aware of each state's practice act for PTAs.
Mhm.
So I have a very large spreadsheet that includes that. So, like
Wow. Yeah.
Arizona, a PT can only supervise 2 PTAs. I am one of those, even though I'm remote.
Even though you're
So
remote. Yeah. Mhm.
yep. So we have to follow that. So we also know that some states have direct supervision, right? So
Mhm.
how does that work when we have states that have direct supervision? Medicare has passed legislation that allows general supervision for RTM specifically.
Hmm.
So in the states that have direct supervision, I am allowed under general supervision to do remote therapeutic monitoring
Hmm.
under that state. So these are the things that we're learning and figuring
Yeah.
out as we go to empower. So a lot of states are still like, what's RTM? Right. So a lot of boards don't have all the information yet. So like I called Florida State Board and they were like, we don't know much about RTM yet. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay, that doesn't help me
Yeah.
yet, but we're trying to figure out. Arizona is, we're in the process of adding RTM to our legislation. So each state is in a different process as well. So part of my role as the PTA is it's up to me to know the law and to do my scope of practice. That is part of my job. It's not just the company's job or just the PT's job. It's everyone's job. And so it is something that's really important as the PTA that you advocate for yourself and you know what you can and cannot do. Because some people are like, oh, you can't do that. When in actuality, I can. And here's what shows that I can. And here's how we can do that. Um, so that's been, I think, the biggest thing in the last 3 months is just the amount of research I've done for RTM and making sure each state is compliant.
Yeah.
And then when we're trying to get buy-in, so a big part, this is where the sales component comes in. We have to have the clinic want to do the remote therapeutic monitoring with someone that's not inside their clinic. So part of that buy-in is that it's really nice when the sales team and myself can do face-to-face meetings with the PT team so that they know, okay, Jessica has a face, she has a voice, we know her background, we know that she's done PTA for a long time. And then I can say, well, how do you interact with your patients? Because I want to match that. Part of the role as a PTA is that I am an extension of a PT's brain at times, their
Mhm.
clinical rationale.
We're
So I
chameleons.
exactly. So in my company in Maryland, I worked under 25 different PTs and I had to learn their clinical rationale, how they did evals, why they thought a certain way, so that when I saw that patient, there was continuity of care. I
Mhm.
still need to have that continuity of care with the patients that I talk to in RTM because they want to know that I'm part of the team. Patients trust the team that they see. And so, in order for me to become a part of that team, I have to build the trust with the therapists and with the patients that they treat. So, that's a big part right now is trying to develop that in a really secure way. So, doing Zoom calls with leadership, clinic leadership, to explain this is what I do, this is how we do it, but I need to know what you do and how you do it so that I can be the best part of the team. So one clinic is like, this is how we talk about pain. He's like, I want you to talk about pain only this way because this is how we talk about it in clinic.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and so I do that, and then the patient's like, oh yeah, like my PT said the exact same thing.
Hmm.
Perfect. Like that's what we want. Um, so that is kind of like what's in the works right now of what we're working on. Later down the road comes like software, comes scaling to much larger sizes. Like we want this to be a massive program, but we
Yeah.
have to build it in a really secure and successful way now in order to get there.
Yeah, key.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Athellis, they're doing really cool work.
Hmm.
I mean, I know that I know a few people who work for Athellis, and it's a broad company, like, and they're really
Hmm.
like cutting edge with AI too,
Yeah.
right? You know,
Yeah.
so a lot of the things that Athellis is doing with AI is really changing the
Hmm.
billing. So like revenue cycle management, right? You know,
Yeah.
so what we're getting paid for. I think that we have to become more comfortable with touching these things that are outside of our norm. You
Hmm.
know, yes, PT can remain traditional. We will still use our
Yeah.
hands. We still treat patients with our manual skills, and nothing's going to remove that. And AI isn't going to come for our jobs
Right.
yet. But we have to be comfortable with using these
Hmm.
types of technologies, or we're going to get left behind.
Yes.
Like, if you're
100.
not willing to, like, move and groove at these things, you're gonna get left in the dust because
Yeah.
somebody else will, and they're
Yes.
gonna figure it out. And so
Yeah.
I love that, how cutting edge and, innovative that
Hmm.
Ellis is being with some of these things. Like you just said, like the remote therapeutic monitoring, like it's not the perfect system hasn't been built yet, but
Right.
you guys are learning and you're figuring that out, and you're including the right people on that team to figure
Mhm.
it out.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I just saw this job posting and I said, this looks so perfect. I don't know if it's real because we also know there's fake jobs out there.
Sure, yeah.
And I was looking for like a not in clinic because I was out of the country for a while last year. And so I was like, well, I can't work in the States because I'm not in the States. So it took about 9 months to find any kind of remote
Mhm,
job that used all of my skills. I was like, I don't want to give up my PTA stuff. I love it so much. Like, I'm not willing to let go. I let go of the in clinic and I left because I moved internationally, but I was like, it's still me. It's still
mhm,
such like a passion of mine, and care is so important. And so I applied to, I don't want to say the number of jobs I applied to because it was insane with very little feedback. So when I saw this job, I was just like, I'm tired. I don't know.
mhm.
And so I slept on it. And the next morning I went, just do it. I'm just going to do it. Like, why not? So
Hit the start button.
yeah, I was like, even if it's not real or it's a bot or something, at least I can apply. And that was like on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And like Friday morning they called and they're like, are you available for an interview? And I was like, I'm available in this moment. Like I'm available right now, like at any time.
Yeah.
And they were like, great. And so we just started, it was very similar to like, we just started talking. And my passion for program development and making changes and taking something and making it better and trying to apply, it's just all was there.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm available to start whenever. And so when I came back to the States, I kind of am everywhere. I'm in Maryland, I'm in Indiana, I'm in Florida. I kind of just go wherever. Um, it just worked out and I started applying for all the licenses and I just had time to make it happen really quickly. And that's kind of how I ended up with this job is that they were like, oh, we want to do RTM, but we only have nurses. And then they realized, oh, nurses can't do reviews under a PT. So they
Mhm.
were like, we need a PTA now. And they posted it and I applied and that was that. um, they interviewed everyone else, but it just worked out. And
Mhm.
so I took the job and I was like, this fulfills all of the things I've worked my whole entire career to allow to get to. And I just kind of took a chance on this job and just went for it. Um, Kind of like I've done most of the things, I guess, in
I
my
was
career.
just gonna say, this is just Jessica. Like, this is who
You
you
are,
are,
yeah,
listening to your background. I
it
mean,
is
I've
right.
known you, I've been speaking to you
57 minutes.
verbally for the first time ever in my life for a little bit under an hour and 10 minutes. And I've already figured this out about you is, so, and that's great. And again, I have like 1,000 questions to ask you. So like, I have all these ideas of things that I'm going to ask somebody when they come on the show.
Right.
But like, I mean, you've taken this in so many different directions. I don't even like know where to go at this point. You've touched on so many things that I'm constantly like telling
Yeah.
the audience and trying to bring to the audience's attention is we don't have to fit a certain mold. You can
Yeah.
create your own mold. Um,
I wish, like, and I think I'm very similar to you. It's like, I wish that we could go to all the PTA programs. What you should do, I like how I said what you should do is really try to connect with PTA programs to get your podcast to the students. Like, this information to students is what's going to change the future of clinicians,
mhm,
because the more, like I always say, the more knowledge you have, the more power you have. The more power you have, the more change you can make. And so if we can, again, we get this to, like, I'm going to send your podcast to my whole entire PTA program
but thank you.
already. Yes, like, because I think it's so important that they hear what we're doing now in their studentship,
Yeah.
because that's going to allow them to have the fellowship, the followership, and the fellowship, and the leadership eventually one day, and to pass it on. So I just think it's something like, or they, I want to mass send it to every PTA program to just say, let's start empowering your students now, because
Mhm.
why not?
Yeah.
Again, why not?
Absolutely. Well, and I think it goes back to the fingerprints thing, right? So like you doing the work that you did at your previous employment to get those PTAs and to assist that whole process to getting those PTAs better opportunities in management and leadership. I mean, it took a long time.
Mhm.
And you look back and you can say, yes, I've put my hands on that. And there's a lot of work that I've done with our professional association that my name isn't written on things, but I can look at the project or the end result and say
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
fingerprints were on that. Like I touched that
Yeah.
in some way,
Yeah.
and I'm proud of that because it's going to give more opportunity to other PTAs in the
Mhm.
future. So
Right.
it isn't about how it affects me right now. It's about the future of physical therapy, and it's about
Correct.
the future of what happens with PTs and PTAs, and it helps both of us
Mhm.
as that team moving forward. Say this to my students all the time. I'm like, the opportunities that you're going to have when you graduate are tenfold what I had,
Mhm.
but it took 10, 15, 20 years to get there. You're
Right.
not going to have to break down the same barriers that we
Right.
did because they've already been broken down for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So take advantage of it.
Take advantage. Exactly.
Yeah, take
Exactly.
advantage of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what would you say to somebody who's kind of like maybe thinking about dipping their toes into something like remote therapeutic
Mhm.
monitoring? I don't even know how many because Athelis isn't the only one doing remote
Right.
therapeutic monitoring, right?
Right.
But
Right.
I don't know how many PTAs on a scale or data is that are working
Right.
in this type of field. But if there was somebody who was interested, like what would you say to them as far as like preparation and things they should consider before they like
Yeah.
take a dive into this?
I think there's the state. So there's a couple different models. There are companies that are hiring PTAs for a state. So let's say Indiana. So I'm licensed. If I'm licensed in Indiana, I'm working with clinics just in Indiana, and like they might be doing 10 clinics in Indiana. So you kind of have to look at what companies, research companies that are doing remote therapeutic monitoring. I will say, when you Google RTM, it's hard to find great information, right?
Mhm.
But there's the podcast that Jimmy does, and he has quite a few guests that talk about RTM as well. There's other companies. When you research remote therapeutic monitoring, some other like companies as a whole will pop up that are doing it just as RTM. And then there's a couple companies that are the billing company, so they're providing the service kind of like we are as a third party service.
Mhm.
So I'm outside of the clinic, maybe even outside of the state, but I'm taking care of all the patients in that clinic. Another idea, and I think this is something that's really powerful for PTAs to bring to their companies, is that you can do this in clinic as well. So some
Mhm.
clinics are saying you get 30 minutes a week to kind of gather all of your remote monitoring minutes, like you emailed, you called, you went into home exercise programs, you adjusted them. That is a little bit more like tallying numbers on a piece of paper, but those are opportunities for maybe PTAs to say, I might want to take something on. I might want to look into how I could bring this to my company as a supportive role and something that could bring in a little revenue, right? When we want to bring new ideas, we need to show the revenue component to our leadership. So you can say, as the PTA, I would like to maybe start gathering some data points to say, how could we bill these let's stick with Medicare, because Medicare is the one that reimburses consistently. If I have a Medicare patient and I know that they called twice last week, or I know that I engaged in my home exercise program and they said, oh, this exercise didn't make sense, so that's 7 minutes. Or I called them, or so and so called them. So like over the month, if you can get to 20 minutes of doing some type of engagement, you can bill a code for that. So that's your revenue that you're now bringing back into the clinic. So you can do it in person, on site, kind of collecting that data. You can do it third party, which is what I do. And so I collect the data for the clinician, so they don't really have to take that time out. So it just kind of depends on how your clinic works. If you want to build it into your system in clinic, or if you don't want your clinicians to take time out because they're seeing patients, some companies offer the third party, like some payers and some billing companies will offer that. And that's where Athelis comes in, is we do your billing, your revenue cycle management. When you get denials, we fight it. And then we also can offer remote therapeutic monitoring. So it's kind of like all in one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that anybody who's listening to this, and there are PTAs out there that own and run their own clinics too. So like if you are out there and you're listening to this episode and you think that Athelis might be a company that can help you, whether, like you said, with remote therapeutic monitoring or with some of that revenue cycle management as well, because we can't forget, this is something that can be billed for. Like we can make money, we can bring money back to the clinic on that.
Right.
And that's something that we should want to do.
Right.
We should want to keep our lights on, right?
Right.
We want to
Right.
provide really good care, but we need to pay our employees too, and make sure that
Right.
we all can have a good career and a good life too. So this is definitely something that's billable. So we got
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
remember to do that as well. Jess, where is a place that people can find a little more information about Athelis? I know you said that like it's kind of hard to find some information about
RTM
RTM, like,
is hard, and so Athelis, their website does have I think a spot for RTM. I think they talk. I think. I think I'm not
it's fine.
sure.
We can put it in the show notes.
Yeah. I was like, I might have to do some research myself on just like the different links. To like, I know that like all of their RCM and billing and EHR, they like, and I think because this is like we have Athelis and then we have like our little stepping stones.
Yeah, of course.
Still building, but you can contact me. I'm on LinkedIn,
Perfect.
Jessica Nelson.
Yeah.
And then I think Athelis is like attached to me since I work there.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the website, I don't even want to just assume it's athelis.com, but we
You know
can
what?
attach
And
that. Yeah.
I
I'll
kind of
just
like
send it to
threw
you.
that question in there. That wasn't necessarily one that was originally on the
That's
list,
okay.
anyways. But I feel like we
Go tell
definitely
my boss.
props where props are due, right?
Yeah.
Because Athelis is not a sponsor of my show. I am not getting paid to say these
Right.
things. But like I said, I do know just from being in proximity to other people who work for the company that
Yeah.
there's some really cool things happening
There is some cool,
at
some cool stuff.
Athelis. So, but lots of really good information that we talked about today. I think that if I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like you were passionate enough about PTAs that if people had questions, that you would be maybe open to
Oh
like
yeah, always.
trying to at least point them in the right direction.
Yeah.
It sounds
Yeah.
like you're still kind of building this airplane a little bit as you're flying it, which is sometimes the best way to build a product because you are troubleshooting in
Yeah.
real time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're kind of seeing what's working and what's not working all at the same time. So
It's true. Yeah, it's interesting because it's like a startup kind of feel. So going from in clinic corporate healthcare to like a startup vibe is also like I even Googled. I think I went to Chat GPT and I was like, how does one go from a corporate to a startup?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I was like, and they were like, be flexible, and I was like, how flexible?
I need
Pretty
more
flexible. Because it's very different, and then also like just the whole productivity side's different and the way people think, it's it's very interesting, and it really allows me to just, all those times that I've thought outside the box, I can just keep going. And
Mhm.
so for me, I'm like, ooh, there's not really the constraints that I felt in the past with just trying to think of new ways to, like, I am like, if something doesn't work, I'm going to figure out a way to make it work, and ask the questions. So like sometimes people, like IT or HR is like, no, I'm like, but why?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Why not? So
yeah.
this has allowed me to really be like, okay, well, like the State Board of Arizona says this. Okay, why? Let's look at that. And then how can I adjust what I'm doing
Mm,
to still be effective?
mm.
So that's been really interesting as well.
Yeah, great. Jess, this has
Yeah,
been, you are a wealth of information,
thank
a
you.
wonderful conversation.
I had
I
so much
had
fun.
about 50 questions planned for
Mhm.
you, and I think I asked you like three because I was so engaged from the beginning with you just on the steps that you've taken to get where you are right now. And I think that it's just such valuable information for the audience to hear is just ways that we can kind of reach
Mhm.
outside of what we know to be true, ask lots of questions, push those boundaries, and
Mhm.
just keep showing up where we're not supposed to
Yeah,
be,
yeah, I
and
agree.
ask why not. So,
Yep.
would you mind wrapping today's episode up with what we call our plus point? And that's just where you can give your final words of advice, your call to action, anything that you want to say to the PTs and PTAs that might be listening
Yeah,
to today's
I
show.
can I can try my best. I think the most empowering thing that we can do for ourselves is make the choice and then make the leap. So I know people are thinking about something deep down in their head that they've wanted to look into, push through, ask their manager, ask their company, learn a new skill. And it's, the question is, why not? Why aren't you pushing through that? What are those reasons? And to really think about that, because if it's that you're just a little worried or a little scared, that's okay. I I've been nervous with all of this, all of these things.
Right? Yeah.
But on the other side is something really, really important and something really powerful. So if you're like, oh, as a PTA, I'm thinking I could go to my boss about this, think about how to do that. Or ask one of us how to help you do that. I think it's something to like also ask for advice and help with these things that you're thinking about. Because the question is just why not push through a little bit? And there are ways to do that really successfully. And so I just encourage everyone to really think about the reasons that they might be holding back, or just the reasons that they're questioning something, because there's something to that. And let's find out what it is.
I love it. Great. Thank you so much, Jessica,
You're
for sharing
welcome.
your time and your knowledge with us.
Anytime.
I'm always just completely, caught by surprise when people are like, "Yeah, sure, I'd like to come onto your show," and I'm like, "Oh, are you sure? You don't mind
Right.
asking me a bunch of
Right.
questions?" And
I know.
you say yes.
And I will say, like, I was nervous, and I was like, I'm not I'm a podcast listener, like die hard, obsessed podcast listener. But I've always been, who are these people that talk on podcasts? How do they do it? Like, it sounds so intimidating and scary, but you make it really comfortable and just kind of just talking. I think that's really speaks a lot to you and the comfort that you create for someone to come on that's never done this and just feel at home, and in a safe space. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to feel that. I just get to ask really amazing people questions. So like you're the expert. And my job is easy. You just get to be the expert. So, but
Thank
thank you so
you.
much. I really
Of
appreciate your
course.
time.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to PTA Plus, the podcast for PTAs by PTAs. Subscribe, follow us on social, and share the show. Elevate yourself. This show is for educational purposes only. No clinical decision making should be made from its content. See you next time.